Right now, in this exact moment, you are not bored. You are watching, reading, consuming, doing exactly what your brain demands. But there is a feeling you have been avoiding, a quiet, uncomfortable, slightly unbearable feeling that creeps in the moment the screen goes dark, the room goes silent, and there is nothing left to do. You know that feeling. Most people run from it as fast as they possibly can. But what if that feeling is not a flaw in your design? What if it is the most sophisticated tool your brain has ever built? Boredom feels like emptiness. It feels like a problem with no solution. But the real answer is far stranger than that. Boredom is not the absence of stimulation. It is a signal, an ancient, precise, evolutionary alarm. And the way modern life treats it may be one of the most expensive mistakes your brain has ever been forced to make. Start at the beginning. For most of human history, your ancestors did not have an endless supply of things to look at. There was no feed to scroll, no queue of content, no notification waiting on the other side of a tap. There were stretches of time, long, unstructured, unoccupied stretches, where the brain had no immediate task. And in those stretches, something remarkable happened. The brain did not simply power down. It activated a completely separate network, a default state that researchers now call the default mode network. And in that state, it began to do some of its most important work. Neuroscientist Marcus Raichle at Washington University first mapped this network in the early 2000s. He noticed something strange. When people were given no task to perform, the brain did not go quiet. Certain regions actually became more active. The medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the hippocampus. These are not peripheral structures. These are among the deepest, most evolutionarily ancient parts of your thinking mind. And they fire together, in concert, precisely when you are doing nothing at all. What are they doing? They are consolidating memory. They are running simulations of the future. They are rehearsing social scenarios, imagining outcomes, connecting ideas that conscious, task-focused thinking never has time to stitch together. In plain terms, your brain uses boredom to think about itself, and it turns out that process is not optional. It is essential. Psychologist Sandi Mann at the University of Central Lancashire ran a series of now famous experiments on boredom and creativity. In one study, participants who were made to perform a deeply boring task, copying out phone numbers by hand, subsequently performed significantly better on creative problem-solving exercises than a control group who had not been bored at all. The bored brain, she concluded, goes searching. Deprived of external stimulation, it turns inward. And in turning inward, it begins to generate. It begins to imagine. It begins to ask questions it never would have asked if it had been busy. This is not a coincidence. This is architecture. Your brain was built to cycle between focused engagement and open, unstructured rest. And both states are productive. Both are necessary. You have been taught to value only one of them, the focused one, the busy one, the one that looks, from the outside, like you are getting something done. But the open one, the bored one, is where integration happens, where meaning gets made, where you figure out not just what you are doing, but why. Think about the moments when your best ideas have arrived, not sitting at your desk, grinding through a problem. They came in the shower, on a long drive, staring out a window on a train, in those transitional, almost purposeless moments where the mind had permission to wander. That is not a coincidence either. That is the default mode network, doing exactly what it evolved to do, roaming freely across everything you know, making connections your deliberate, task-focused attention would never have found. Neuroscientist Jonathan Smallwood, who has spent years studying mind wandering, describes it as a kind of mental time travel. When your mind drifts, it is rarely drifting at random. It is moving through time, backward into memory, forward into anticipation, sideways into the lives of other people. It is building your sense of self.
It is constructing the story of who you are and who you might become. And it can only do that when the signal of boredom is allowed to land, allowed to sit, allowed to do its work. But there is a problem, a modern problem.
For the first time in human history, boredom has become effectively optional. Every moment of unoccupied attention can now be filled, instantly, with a stream of content calibrated, at a neurochemical level, to keep you from ever feeling that quiet discomfort. Your phone does not just entertain you, it interrupts the signal. It steps in front of the alarm before it can sound, mutes the message before you can read it, and replaces the internal experience of boredom with an external experience of stimulation, so precisely tuned that your brain cannot tell the difference between meaning and distraction. The result is a kind of cognitive debt. The rest the brain was supposed to take, it did not take. The consolidation work it was supposed to do, it did not do. The connections it was supposed to make, the simulations it was supposed to run, the identity work it was supposed to complete, all of it deferred, displaced by content that is engineered to feel important and rarely is. You feel this. You feel it in the strange flatness at the end of a day where you consumed enormous amounts of content and produced almost nothing. You feel it in the difficulty of sitting quietly for even 3 minutes without reaching for your phone. You feel it in the way problems that used to feel solvable now feel stuck, because the neural environment in which you once solved them, the bored, wandering, open state, is now almost inaccessible. Your ancient brain keeps sending the signal. The discomfort rises, but before it can do its work, you silence it. Every time. And the silence costs you more than you know. There is a word in psychology for what happens when an organism is denied the natural cycles its biology depends on. Allostatic load. The cumulative cost of chronic disruption. The body and brain can adapt, but adaptation has a price. And one price of a life lived in permanent stimulation is a quiet but mounting deficit in the cognitive processes that boredom was designed to support. Creativity, self-knowledge, long-term thinking, emotional regulation, and the sense, deep and difficult to manufacture artificially, that your life has a direction you chose. Here is what your ancestors knew without knowing it. They sat by fires with nothing to do. They lay in fields watching clouds. They walked long distances in silence, not because they were at peace, not because they were enlightened, but because there was nothing else. And in that nothing, the brain did its deepest work. The stories that gave meaning to their lives were composed in those gaps. The social bonds that kept their communities alive were rehearsed in those gaps. The plans that shaped their futures were built in those gaps. You have traded those gaps for a feed. And the feed is very, very good at keeping you from noticing what you lost. The answer is not to throw the phone into the sea. It is simpler and harder than that. The answer is to let the boredom land, to sit with the discomfort for long enough that your brain recognizes the signal and begins to respond to it, to treat the quiet, squirming, slightly unbearable feeling of having nothing to do, not as a problem to be solved, but as a doorway, the specific and irreplaceable doorway through which your most human thinking enters. Because here is the thing about boredom that your ancestors understood in their bones. It is not the enemy of a good life. It is the condition one, the space in which you become, rather than simply consume, the frequency on which your brain has always broadcast its most important messages, and you are walking around with noise-canceling headphones in, every hour of every day, wondering why you can no longer hear yourself think. Right now, in this exact moment, you are not bored, but the next time you are, and you will be, try something your ancient brain has been waiting for you to do. Do nothing. Sit with it. Wait. See what arrives when the signal is finally allowed to reach you.